All right, I think we are live here, right? People hopefully joining. We'll give it a few minutes for those who are joining us now. Welcome. I think we've got a couple people on. Like I said, we're going to give it a few minutes for people to get on. Always a little bit of a transition between meetings for most people jumping from Zoom to Zoom. So we'll hold a few minutes and then do some introductions. I wish we had hold music for you, but we don't. So we'll just sit here silently instead.
You can hum for people, Seth.
That's not a good idea. I want the numbers to people on here to increase.
Okay, true.
Yeah. Yeah, for anyone who has joined, feel free to drop a comment in the chat, introduce yourself, let people know where you're dialing in from. Hey, L in Kentucky. Kendall in Denver. Great, yeah, I'm also in Denver. I really doubt that. That's not going to happen. Hey, Kimberly from Chicago. I noticed you didn't mention which suburbs, because I know in Chicago there can be, a little animosity there. You don't want to pick any fights. So, hey, is that Patrick from Paris? All right, Patrick, good to see you. Got some other Coloradoans. Downers Grove. All right, Kimberly, I gotcha. That's a good one. No one's got beef with Downers Grove. You're good. I grew up just over the border, by the way, Kimberly, in Kenosha. So there's just general animosity there, but not specific to the suburbs. I'll just give it 1 or 2 more minutes. Again, that's what people sign on here. All right, well, I think we'll kick off. I think, again, we'll have some more people wander in here, but we'll just get through the intros and stuff. Hey, Sarah, welcome. We'll get through the intros and stuff, and then, start the overall webinar. But to introduce myself first, I'm Seth McGuire. I'm the COO here at Spekit. Really excited to be talking today about ways to use AI to maximize go-to-market launch success. And there's been a lot of conversation around ways to use AI across the go-to-market stack. We're going to have fun honing in here a little bit today on actual product launches, which is one of the places we ourselves use Spekit a lot. A lot of our clients do as well. And there's some ongoing challenges there, some things AI helps with, some things it doesn't. And we're looking forward to exploring that, sharing some perspectives, both, again, from us drinking our own champagne, as well as from our clients, and then hearing from you all as well. With that, Jeanna, why don't you introduce yourself here?
Yeah, hi guys, I'm Jeanna Roggow. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Spekit as well. I see some fellow Wisconsinites in the comments, so I'm also from Wisconsin, as is Seth, coincidentally. But yeah, I have been in tech startup for my product marketing career. So I didn't leverage Spekit actually previously, or actually any enablement platform. But now that I'm with Spekit, I see how important AI is to really making sure that your go-to-market success is enabled throughout the entire launch, from pre to post launch. So I'm really excited to be here to talk to you guys about it.
And I'm David Lott. I'm the head of customer strategy here at Spekit. I was the first success hire at Spekit and our first director of success. So I've been here over 6 years, actually. And so I'm excited to talk about this as well, because I've seen an evolution from our customers firsthand of how this has changed and impacted how they work and opportunities that they have to enhance their already existing workflows. So I'm excited to share a little bit of what that looks like after we get through some of these slides here.
Great. Well, thank you both. I'm going to kick us off here. We're going to go through a little bit of data little bit of context, share a little bit of the challenges we've been hearing about and seeing in market. Would definitely love to make that conversation, though. If you do have questions, drop them in the chat. We'll try to track those. We will pause for some polls at some point, but I think it's going to be a mix of data that we're sharing, a little bit of context from those clients, and then in some cases, we'll pop in to actually show you some of the things that we've heard companies doing right now to help them, again, maximize go-to-market launch success. So first thing I think we want to talk about is, I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anyone, but it does feel like we're in a pretty unprecedented period where product innovation especially is accelerating. And it's accelerating in a way that makes it hard to keep up, I think for all of us personally, but also just for go-to-market teams. We've screenshot a few of the, I think this was probably from 1 or 2 days on LinkedIn, the amount of announcements and posts that are going out. But it seems like there is a never-ending parade of product improvements, changes, new product launches, features from across the ecosystem. I don't know if anyone has dug into Mary Meeker's recent AI report, but I was spending some time on the last 2 days. It's 340 slides on all the ways AI is changing the world and industries. And it really has to do with that pace of innovation again, the sheer volume of change that's occurring at this time. I think we see that with all of our clients too. We're not just talking about OpenAI here, right? As we look to all of our clients, the number of products or features that companies ship on average per quarter is really increasing. And the pace of that is starting to reduce from what used to be kind of more traditional, especially in the software world, quarterly shipping of products is now moving backwards to more agile monthly or even weekly shipping of new products and features. Now, the challenge in that, of course, is that the sheer volume of that innovation can stress the go-to-market system, right? It's incredible and great that there is this much product innovation. At the same time, what we're seeing happen is the go-to-market strategies that were built to support a more quarterly or even monthly cadence are falling short when it comes to those faster paces. And the reason for that is things like, well, we're launching content so quickly we don't actually know what's being used, right? Product marketers are struggling to connect the dots over, we shipped this new product, I gave the team this info. Did they use it? Did it drive deals? Did it help to close deals? There's insight that's missing there. And so a lot of times post-launch, we're really flying blind. And Jeanna's going to talk a bit more about this later as a product marketer, that sole view of launching a product versus the life cycle of that product launch. In addition, information overload is just reducing speed, right? So that pace of product shift or product change is creating misalignment between marketing and sales because there's too much information going to be put into a process. And so where we see that have impact is in things like pipeline velocity. You start to ask questions like, oh, we just shipped a new product. Do I interrupt my sale for that process, right? I'm mid-sale or I'm in mid-process and sales cycle. Do I stop to tell them the new feature? Do I insert that right here? Do I wait? How did that impact pricing? Do I still honor the pricing I had before we shipped that, right? This never-ending parade of features is really stressing that system. And the reality of that is that the never-ending list of things to be done here mean that we end up treating launches as a one-time event, right? So rather than as an ongoing process of adoption and reinforcement that turns into recurring revenue and growth, we really see it as a one-time event. It's like, hey, let's get this out the door. Let's get the press release, right? Let's get it on the website. Let's do those things. But we lack a bit of that functional handoff between marketing and sales. And you could see from this stat from Clary, who had done research here, that over half of teams think that they lack that functional handoff, right? So again, it's people saying, hey, how are we going to manage this? And that growing gap then has impact on the reps. So if we look at this rate of innovation, which is that kind of pinkish line off and to the right, again, that rate of innovation is increasing. I don't think anyone would deny that. And that's driving an urgency for that post-launch adoption. If you're shipping new products every quarter, you need to be seeing the adoption of those products increase as well, right? Like you no longer have the timeframes to say, oh, we're shipping one thing a year. We have a year till the next product to get those metrics in line. A lot of expectation from companies, especially given the pressure AI is putting on them, is that these new features and products they're shipping will be adopted, right? Their clients are going to buy them. They will be part of deals. They'll be used. The challenge here in the growing gap is that the legacy content strategies for helping that to happen haven't kept pace with this. And so we see the result there in things like some reps having to search 3+ repositories for answers, more than 3 channels bombarded with comms about every launch announcement. I'm going to pause here to ask, like, is this true? I mean, are the people on the phone seeing that sort of increase in the number of places you have to put answers and the number of channels you have to post things, that is increasing the workload to push that press release or to push that product launch, while at the same time not seeing the level of adoption because it's too much noise. Curious if anyone, you can just raise your hand or say +1 if that's a thing you're feeling. And so the old playbook, thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Kendall. So the old playbook that we're talking about, when we say that old playbook isn't working anymore, really what we're talking about is broken content creation and broken content discovery. And this is where I'm going to walk through each of these, but I would love, if you want to pop into the channel, I've numbered them, which number you feel is currently your biggest challenge and the place you're struggling. But on the broken content creation side, when it comes to product launches, what we're seeing is that most companies are restarting at launch almost from zero, right? So every launch feels like a net new launch with heavy resource investment, which is very difficult when, again, you're launching more than ever and training more than ever. But there isn't really a muscle to reuse some of that process or reuse some of that content. The second is that content has to be recreated in different formats. Again, given all the channels that we're working in, given the number of places we're putting information, you're creating the same thing in PowerPoint, or Google Drive, documents, PDFs. Maybe you're making a video. Maybe you're using a tutorial or an app queues-like feature, right? The number of assets you have to create and the type of assets is ever increasing, but the speed at which you then need to update and ship those again continues to increase. The third on content creation is that there isn't a central view of that product information. So it's really hard to update that messaging or to update changes. So again, once you've created all this content and you've put in these different places, it's in Teams or Slack, it's in emails you've sent out to the team. You might have a Google Drive or a SharePoint instance you've loaded it in. Maybe you have a CMS you're working in. Maybe it's in an LMS. Every time then you're trying to get a sense for what was useful or used, you can't see it. Right? It's in too many places at once. And so it's hard to get really a central view of what's valuable. Now, the other side of the curve is the content discovery, really where reps or agents are using this information. And the challenge there is, again, reps are being bombarded with noise in usually over 3 channels. That's based on some research we did with the Sales Enablement Collective that looked at the average number of channels reps go to find information. And so what ends up happening there is when you get too bombarded with information, you start ignoring it. Right? It's too many pieces of information. So you don't use it, you don't glean it, you don't learn it, but then you need to find it at some point in the future. Then the next is content is spread across 3 repositories. So again, it's being put in too many places. In fact, over 40% of a salesperson's time is spent searching for or creating content because they can't find the needed resource, right? So 40% of time is being spent looking for information that was put into multiple channels and that needs to be constantly updated. Then even if they can find it to use, there isn't an easy way to see what content was viewed or used by their buyers. So like even if sales reps begin to use this content, they also don't know what's working. Just like you don't get that view if it's working, they don't get a view if it's working. So I'll pause here a minute, but numbering those 1 through 6 would be interesting if you want to pop in. What's the number one of those that pop out at you as a challenge that you're seeing today? Just kind of interested in a quick gut check from the audience. Yeah, the discovery one seems to be popping up a lot there, and the spread across repositories. Yeah. And the channel, the noisy channels. Yep. Okay. Yeah, I think that's pretty consistent again a lot. And we do have a great report on that from, again, the Sales Enablement Collective interviewed over 100 different enablement owners and looked at some of the challenges that they face right now. And there's some more interesting data on this. So ping us after if you haven't seen that. We're happy to send that to you, or it's on our website. But I think it goes into some of these challenges. So not surprised to see a lot of attention on 3, 4, and 5 for sure. Okay. So the consequence of that, again, I don't want to preach to the choir. I think you're probably all seeing these things. But the truth is that, one, when your reps end up relying on outdated messaging instead of new messaging and materials, you get confusion and inconsistency. In the best of cases, in the worst of cases, you get misquotes on products that no longer exist, features you don't support, pricing that's no longer approved, right? They can start to run into some real compliance issues if they're not accessing the right information, which can be both a function of you had to update it in multiple places and didn't, or they just found an old one, or they saved it to their desktop, or they did any of the things that reps do. And I say that as a person who's been a sales rep. It's just the truth. The second piece here is that they deliver the wrong message, right? And so it might not be as bad as incorrect, like in the first case, but it's not aligned with their persona. It's not at the right stage for the deal. It's reducing the overall win rates. So the first one is kind of like, hey, you're getting them the wrong information in general about your company. The second one is like, it's lacking the personalization that we now expect. I think there's no shortage of information around the personalization that predominates the go-to-market industry now. And if your reps are not meeting that bar, win rates are going to drop, right? Because what they're going to see happen is reps from other places who are getting that right will win. And so really getting them the right information for that right deal at the right time matters. And a lot of that has to do with, for product launches, getting them the most updated information they need to win a deal in the right moment where they can tell a competitive story. And the last is limited usage and visibility, again, makes it really hard to know what's working. And so what we see happening is that people continually invest in the wrong items, right? So what they're doing is they're investing, but they're building the same PDF that the sales reps didn't send last time. Or for the product launch, they're doing a 45-minute video that no one sends because it's too long. So the investment in those materials really needs to be reflected in what we see as those close and win rates. And the stats prove that out. Again, from a similar study we had talked about before, reps just aren't using the marketing collateral. So out of those interviewed, 86% of teams said that their reps are using less than 60% of their content, which is, again, problematic on two fronts. It means all the work you're doing as marketers, one, or enablement, is not recognized and used. And then two, the reps aren't using the content that could help them close deals, or that could help them adhere to that process, or could help them develop pipeline. And so it's a real miss on both sides because it's an incurred cost without the ROI. Now we get to kind of the AI portion of this. And I think this is where it's interesting to consider all of those advancements AI is helping us with, right? AI is incredibly powerful and it can help with many of the things we're talking about, but it actually can't fix the broken foundation, which is one of collaboration, alignment, and integration. So marketers in the recent State of Marketing ranked AI adoption as a priority and a challenge, number one on both sides, right? It is a thing they are focused on, but it's also a huge challenge for them. And part of that is because they're using it to build a lot more content. But as Jeanna and I have talked about, building more content can't fix whether reps use it or find it, right? What it can actually create is even more of an issue when they now have more content because it was easier in some ways to create and you were able to produce more of it more quickly, but it's not, again, being delivered to them in a way that they can use. They can't find that content, they can't use it, they don't, and even if they do, you can't measure it. So those foundational issues still exist, although we're applying AI to help in some of these places. The other issue is that AI needs structure and signals. So like in current systems today, unless you're going to put in a real lot of effort to help manage that content, it's really hard to prioritize and understand what content's being used again. Some of those last issues then is that if reps don't trust the answers, they're going to start ignoring them, right? And this is where AI still being young and still having some challenges can create issues. It's like, can they trust the information being shared? And this is part of where we see a little bit of the swivel chair challenge of if they're not finding the answer from you, they swivel it aside and check ChatGPT on their phone and get an answer from a public source instead of the source you said, or they build their own content from those places, which again starts to get back to having the wrong information in the sales cycle that doesn't necessarily help. So again, AI is valuable, but it can't necessarily fix that broken foundation. So with that as the backdrop, Jeanna's going to talk a bit about coming from there. What are the three main friction points in product launches, given those challenges and given the way we use AI, that we do think are approachable and measurable, and places we've successfully seen clients build some new processes to help to deliver better product launch strategies that result in revenue?
Yeah, so like Seth was saying, we've talked a lot about what's broken from, like GTM content creation on the PMM side, all the way down to that content discovery where reps are digging in 3+ different locations just to find the right launch assets or info. And we know that it's kind of this like flawed system. So we really need to talk about what actually then needs to change. And then based off of everything that Seth has kind of gone over today, we can pull three main key friction points out that are holding GTM teams back today. Number one, that content isn't unified or measurable. So it's everywhere, which means no one knows what's actually working at any given time. Number two, even great content gets lost if it's not delivered in the right moment. So context and timing matter here. If reps can't find it, they're not going to use it. It's just that plain and simple. And then three, marketers, PMMs, we are flying blind we need those content insights. We create a ton of content, but it's really hard to actually tie it back to revenue impact. And there's basically zero visibility there, especially when reps aren't using it in the right ways. We don't know what's going on. So in order for us and for your teams to move faster and really scale intelligently, we have to address all of these 3 friction points. And the cool thing here is actually that AI can help us do that. So let's start with unified content. In my experience, in most organizations, launch content is scattered, kind of like what Seth was saying, across different decks and docs and folders, enablement platforms if you use them, Slack or Teams, etc. I know most PMMs can relate to this. In the simplest term possible, it's chaos post-launch. It's like a wild plate of spaghetti, right? It's scattered content. It makes it almost impossible for us to ensure messaging consistency during GTM motions. And it makes it really difficult for us to try and reuse and repurpose content across launches, even though that's, sometimes the quickest way that we can get success. So we ask ourselves, what's going on with all of this content chaos? A unified content strategy, right, that gives PMMs control. And I like to think about it as, building content, that content foundation once, and then you can deploy it everywhere. So we don't have to start from scratch every time. So that goes into managing and unifying content. Like I mentioned before, most GTM teams are managing content across many different systems. And this fragmentation leads to duplicative work, inconsistent messaging, and content that gets lost in the shuffle. And so unifying your content, though, doesn't mean just like dropping everything into one giant folder and being like, hey, yes, it's unified. It actually means having this structured system to manage and maintain a single source of truth for that content. We also then need to look at the content engine that's focused on discovery, engagement, insights, curation. So think of this as your content system engine. It's not static. It's not a library. It's not a repository. It's not that big folder. You need lots of different tools that not only store content, but then can surface it when it's needed to be able to track how it's doing so your teams can optimize on that. The next would be content system. That content system or engine needs to be able to combine capabilities from disparate categories to center them around, that rep experience. So how do your reps work? I would say at past companies I've worked at, I've never really asked myself that question, nor would I really thought to care, like, why do I, as a product marketer, care where our sales reps are working? In most organizations, content lives across different categories. So that's like, your sales enablement tools, wikis, CRMs, platforms, etc. The problem here is that reps don't think in categories like that. They think right within their workflows. So they're already required to context switch based on the prospect that they're speaking to. So then requiring them to add another layer of context switching to try and figure out, what content for which launch lives where is a really big cognitive load. So one unified system kind of brings together all of those different capabilities. And then finally, this is all brought together kind of by the power of AI to connect all of this launch content. So unifying content also unlocks that real potential of AI. In general, if your content isn't tagged, structured, contextualized, kind of like what Seth was saying, AI can't really help you. But on the flip side, if it is, then AI can connect the dots. So it can recommend content, identify gaps, or even accelerate what your team is already doing. And this is how we move from just like create more content, generative AI, et cetera, to then create smarter, more connected content that we can use. All right, so moving on to personalized real-time content delivery. We know how and why unified content management strategies are so important for GTM launches. The next main obstacle here, though, would be, I wouldn't say like to make a frictionless product launch because that's very idealistic, but a more unified and cohesive product launch is that content delivery aspect. And even the best content won't drive results, as we know, if it shows up too late or in the wrong place. But AI-powered assistants can now anticipate what reps and buyers need based on the context of their workflows. So looking at email threads, calls, transcripts, CRM activity, etc., and then surface the right content in the moment based on kind of what that workflow is. So the key benefits here are being higher GTM or product launch content adoption by reps. Yay, when reps receive the right content in the right moment, i.e., not on Slack or Teams in a message that they saw 2 days ago and then they have to go digging for it, they are far more likely to actually use and adopt that content. And it's that just-in-time delivery that really separates content that gets adopted from the content that then just gets kind of like archived or decays within your systems or your drives. It also unlocks personalization at scale. So without increasing work for PMMs, for example, based on a rep's territory or target persona or even like CRM context, AI can then dynamically tailor the content that's surfaced to them and what they see and then what they can share with the buyers. And so this reduces that kind of, one size fits all enablement, and it ensures that content actually speaks to your buyer's needs directly. And then finally, we don't need more content. We really need that relevant content in the hands of the right people. So according to Salesforce, 86% of business buyers are more likely to buy when vendors understand their objectives. So this stat highlights something that I think we all know here. The more aligned our messaging is to the buyer's goals, the faster the deal moves. So AI helps reps show that alignment by setting up these talk tracks and case studies, one-pagers, et cetera, all this content that matches the buyer's exact stage or persona or pain point. So the rep shows up prepared with that kind of why us message already tailored. And that's then what creates that trust and momentum to keep moving deals forward. Right, so finally, we've kind of looked at how unified and personalized content makes product launches more successful, but we need to close the loop here. And without insight into how that content is performing, we can't improve on it or prove what's working. Even if we can serve it up to our reps and they can use it, we need to measure it, right? So the first being AI tools enable marketers to monitor GTM content performance across multiple channels in real time. So I would say historically content performance data has been really fragmented or lagging. You might get like very anecdotal feedback from sales reps here or there, or if you do a retro, like post-launch a month after, you can get feedback, but it's not always ideal because you're not getting it in the moment. Today though, AI-powered tools can actually provide real-time visibility into how your content is performing, whether it's being shared or viewed or clicked on, anything like that. You get real-time access to those types of insights, and that means you can spot what's working as it happens, and then you can also pivot and adjust your content strategy on the fly, which is something that we couldn't really do prior to this type of technology. We can also now leverage machine learning. AI can forecast how content will perform before it's even published, right? So this allows us to proactively optimize our strategies compared to that very traditional, very reactive approach to content management. And personally, I think one of the most exciting applications of AI is predictive content scoring. So that means machine learning models can actually analyze past performance patterns of your content and then forecast how new content is likely to perform before it even launches, which is a really cool opportunity for PMMs to test and iterate on their product launches in this type of like change economy where we're moving so quickly. And then once your launch is live, AI can also help you quickly zero in on what assets actually are driving engagement, advancing deals, or getting shared most by your reps. And if you have them, it makes your post-launch retros really more actionable because then you know what content worked, what didn't land, etc. And lastly, you can use AI to analyze data sets. And this isn't just for content performance. This is to see like who's engaging or how they're engaging and when they're engaging, right? So this can reveal new audience segments or behavior patterns that you might have missed, like which persona, consumes content late in the deal cycle, or which verticals engages more with a video. This level of insight really helps PMMs like myself fine tune our targeting and messaging across those personas, stages, industries, et cetera, at scale. So I guess to wrap it up, AI isn't just about creating content faster, right? It's not that generative AI that you're asking, hey, create this white page or one pager for me. It's about creating smarter, more relevant content and delivering it in the moment, and then being able to measure that impact against pipeline. So I would say, ask yourself, is my team using these 3 key friction points in the GTM engine? And if so, how am I addressing them, or how are they addressing them? So you guys can feel free to put your answers in the comments, but really think about those friction points and what your team is doing to address them. But yeah, with that, I will hand it back to Seth to show you how other teams are actually bringing this to life with Spekit.
Yeah, thanks, Jeanna. That's great. I think maybe to sum of what we've gone through so far, there are these underlying challenges with product launches that we do see as indicative of some of the other challenges go-to-market functions face. It is a nice encapsulation of a consistent problem. We've talked about some of here with Jeanna, some of the more general ways organizations could try to combat that using AI. We do want to show you some of the things that we have recently built that we think solve that, and then walk you through. David's going to demo a bit of how some clients have used that to solve those problems. I think, again, at a high level, product launches is not the only problem Spekit solves, but we think of it as a great example for marketing of the 2 places that organizations need to solve that we do solve, which are 1, how do I train and enable my teams on all the information they need to have and then deliver that to them in their flow of work? And 2, how do I manage a company through change? How do I provide them the information they need as things happen, as market moves, as those things occur? And product launches are a great example of both those things. That is a change that is happening in your organization. You have a new product, you've launched something, and you need to organize your team around it and train them in order to drive revenue. Right? So the 4 areas David's going to dig into, just to maybe give you a quick high-level view. The first is what we call playlists. Playlists are really a flexible way to package content for every launch. If you've ever watched your children digging through a bowl of M&Ms to find their favorite yellow one, that's how I think about reps looking through Google Drive, right? They're constantly there. They're throwing stuff over their shoulder. They're looking and asking, where is that piece of content I'm looking for? What playlists allow you to do is to take one central piece of content and then allocate it to many different components or many different list views. So for example, if you're launching a new product, this is your ability to say, here's the frequently asked questions for the product in one sheet. Here maybe is our product sheet that gives all the technical specifications. Maybe here's our updated pricing and persona packaging. Now you have those documents in a playlist view of that. You could actually take all 3 of those and allocate those unique source documents to multiple places. So you might put one of them in the new rep onboarding list view, right? There's a playlist here for new reps on view. And what we're talking about here is the core content creation. So you've created this core content. Now you're going to adapt it and put it in the onboarding view. Then you're going to adapt it and place it in the product launch view. Then you're going to place it in the deal room view of a template that the team can use there. So you're able to allocate one core piece of content to many different places, where it'll be automatically surfaced for the rep anytime they're in that experience. If they're going through a new rep training, they're going to see that piece of content then. If they're reviewing the product launch documentation, they're going to see that. If they're asking a question of the system, they're going to see that content popped up. And David's going to show us a bit what it looks like. But the main point here is that it makes it easy for PMMs to generate and organize content once, and then deliver that content in ways that allows them to measure it across the system. So really trying to halt the view that you need to make multiple pieces of that same content to put in multiple places. How do you create it once, deliver it everywhere, and measure it everywhere? The second thing Dave is going to walk through is our just-in-time assistant, the Spekit AI sidekick. And really what this is, it's an ever-on accompaniment for the rep who follows them and delivers that information they need based on the context of whatever they're doing, wherever they are. So that one system on the side, that extension that we're going to show you, can do a lot of different things. It can answer direct questions that are being asked of it. It can guide the person there by recommending the right go-to-market content based on what's on the screen in front of them. It can give them notifications of actions that their buyers are taking. It can provide you access to those playlist views we talk about, so that your sales rep doesn't need to go into a heavier web app or go look at a longer playlist. They're able to access it right there. So you could really think of this as the always-on, just-in-time assistant whose job it is to look at the context of what a rep is doing, then find the right information in the system and deliver it to them. And it could do that by answering questions or by recommending content or by giving them access to that playlist view for training on a certain topic. And David will walk us through how some clients are using that specifically for product launches to help, again, get that information delivered more in the flow of work so that reps aren't just hearing it and forgetting it or hearing it and losing it, but they always have access to it, which should drive kind of increased adoption and sale of new products. The third area we're going to talk about is deal rooms. Again, Spekit's deal rooms built out of that sidekick where you're able to use content recommendations to build the right information into a centralized, personalized space for a buyer. And so really the goal here is to drive engagement with that content, especially in things like new products, as well as to reduce overall content decay. It's just giving them access to the right set of information in the right time, in real time. And then the last thing he's going to show you a bit about is our trackable links and revenue insights, right? So thinking a bit about ways to tie go-to-market content directly to revenue impact. So getting to that full circle measurement that Jeanna was just talking about. How do you think about tracking those assets you share? How do you think about optimizing based on insight, not just instinct? How do you look quickly at something like a product launch and determine what content is working and being used by the system? So that, David, why don't we turn it over to you and have you jump in here and show us a bit about how some clients are doing that?
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Can you stop sharing the slides? I think I could do that as well. All right. All right, and with that, I'm going to share a little bit about how our customers have been utilizing some of these features and workflows today. And as we've discussed, marketing really needs unified, measurable content, as like that content being disparate and all over the place leads to a disconnect in a way that really travels downstream from the actual features and benefits to how people actually consume that and understand it, to how they translate that out to the market, to their prospects, to their customers, from a value standpoint, right? And that's really important because that affects messaging and positioning and competitive information and everything that is in the sales process, and ultimately, as Seth has pointed out, the bottom line and revenue. So when it comes to go-to-market strategies, what I've seen our customers do really well, and I will call this out, right? We are very focused on sort of product evolution and products here, but we do work with a lot of customers across a lot of industries. So whether you're in technology or something like aluminum, it's your option to have the change that's happening. And in this change economy, it's happening across all industries and across all businesses. But I'm going to speak specifically about a use case from some of our larger technology customers who have really thought through how to apply this and work this into their go-to-market product releases and updates. And so as you see here in my Spekit web application, this is the web app where a lot of the content is managed. And we have what we call topics, which are basically ways of structuring content within Spekit. And this could be AI generated content, as we have the ability to quickly generate content using AI in Spekit. So marketers can easily tailor, unify, and also have things consistently created from a language and formatting standpoint for users to consume, so that it's not a different format for each product information and release that happens, right? But this can also be synced from different sources like Confluence or SharePoint or Google Drive, or uploaded directly as files to Spekit or created within Spekit itself. So if you look here, we have this header, products and solutions, where a lot of the product marketers are going to live and manage the content. And within that, there's a subsection, or what we call subtopics, that exist around the content groupings that you can create. Now, as Seth pointed out with playlists, what this enables is the ability to be flexible with where that content lives, so that whether you're looking for product overviews or you're looking for collateral around product, the same piece of content can be utilized in those different places, which is the playlist aspect. And just to clarify that, it's really like having a song in your music library, whether that's iTunes or Spotify or wherever you use as a platform, and putting that song on. I'm going to put it on my commuting playlist, and I'm going to put it on my after work workout playlist. And I like it for Saturday mornings because it's my favorite song. And it's the same song without duplicating that content, creating a messy library, and then having to clean all of that up at some point. And so what I'm going to focus on is an example that I've sort of anonymized here from a customer, but it's a way that they actually launched a product using that playlist aspect of combining different assets in one place so that it's really easy for the field to understand what it is that's happening, why it's important, what it's affecting, and more importantly, how they can communicate that back out to prospects and customers effectively. And so when I click into the playlist, what's unique about it is it's not taking a bunch of files and putting it in a folder, which is a lot like just having a glorified filing cabinet and saying, oh, from an administrative standpoint, I've created these pieces of collateral and I put them all neatly in this folder, as Jeanna pointed out. That's not a great way for reps to be able to navigate through it and understand it as they're trying to apply that in real time. And so being able to create something that's more modular and a way that they can go through a sequential order of information that really makes sense to introduce them to, hey, here's what's happening. This is why we care. This is what we're building, right? And here are the people that it's affecting and what's happening, from the key features and benefits to the goals of the launch to the channels where this is going to exist, as well as timelines for what to expect as things do iterate. Right? There are MVPs, there are fast follows, there are all these sort of sprints that take place, and understanding that sequence of events to be able to then understand it internally and communicate it externally is paramount, right? So we have all of these things that you can go through in a sequential order, but more importantly, take that information and use it in the flow of work. And I'll show what that looks like in just a moment, but we can go through messaging and positioning. We can go through pitch practice and coaching. We can go through case studies and what's happening with what people are actually expecting and utilizing. We can understand what's happening and then incorporate the collateral that we can share externally, that we can track and tie to deal momentum, pipeline, and how everything else is performing. And what that looks like is our ability to actually take that content and create what we call a deal room. And within a deal room, you have the ability to create a single batch of content and repository to share with a customer or a prospect, where they have one link, one clean view of content to look at, and a simple way to go back to that, share it internally, and socialize all the information that's there. And if you look, we're tying it to the actual opportunity, the stage that it's out, the revenue and the amount of the actual opportunity itself, so that we understand how we're tying what the activity is to the actual outcome of that deal cycle. But what I'd rather show you at this point is what Seth talked about, which is, yes, we set up a lot of great ways for you all as marketers and product marketers and enablers to think about how you organize this content and what's important and where the friction exists today. But what does that look like for the rep now, right? And so as we're here in any place in the flow of work, whether you're in your CRM or you're in your prospecting tools, or you're actually on LinkedIn or any place else, or here in email where you're interacting with a prospect, if you open up that AI sidekick or assistant, it starts to produce a number of different things here based on the context of what's happening. And so in the email here, we're talking about different personas to connect with, to move the deal forward. We're talking about particular features. In this case, we're talking about deal rooms, right? And this is a use case that I just wanted to separate from the previous GTM, but talk about how this actually then gets applied from this aspect. So here's the actual prospect we're talking to. And if you look here, we've got automatic content that's recommended to share externally. So we've got email templates for follow-up. We've got a partnership overview and presentation. We've got a one-pager for the actual feature that's being discussed. Below that, we've got internal knowledge being recommended to that rep. Here are things that you need to know about. Here's templates that you can use internally. Here's the product overview. So again, we're enabling that in real time. So even if they're asking about a new feature, they're asking about an update, it's going to bring up the right content contextually without having to go to another system, open a new tab, or reach out to somebody and wait for that response in Slack or Teams or wherever that's taking place. We can also just pin content or relate content to where users are based on the things that we know they need. So for instance, that products and solutions piece of content that I showed you lives right here, and they can access that playlist right from here in the flow of work without having to go to a destination to get those answers. Now, the last piece is they can even just ask AI a question or ask AI for positioning or for talking points based on the content that they have access to as a rep in that moment. So they can say, please, well, we don't have to say please, as we know they told us to stop doing that. Create 3 talking points for a CRO about deal rooms. Right. And so without me having to then go through the content itself, come up with my own talking points, I've got AI taking the content that exists and summarizing it right here in the flow of work for me to be able to either translate that myself or put that right into my email copy. Well, let's also talk about how reps can use that playlist to then share that content externally that is trackable. So if we look at that external content, if I wanted to share this one pager, I've got the share button here and the opportunity to share it externally or add it to a deal room. And right from here, I can add it to or create a new deal room. So to create a new deal room, I don't know what just happened there. Sorry about that. To create a new deal room, all I have to do is hit create, and then it brings up my list of opportunities that I'm working through. I can tie it to the opportunity that I have, name the deal room if I want to, key account, and add that content to the deal room itself. Now, right here, I have my hub, and I also have my deal rooms available. So here's what my deal rooms look like. And when I have content that I've already added to the deal room and organized, it can all be viewed right here. What I want to show you from the deal room perspective is what that now looks like from the customer or prospect's view, which is they can now, with that link, open up a clean view of all of the content that's been shared throughout the deal cycle, any updates that have happened, with the ability to order this in a presentation-like way for that prospect to be able to go through. So they can create an overview with clickable links here that can go to call recordings or other assets, a mutual action plan, things that need to happen, as well as the presentations that they've been sharing with those prospects that are customized to that deal cycle and going through that information, as well as the collateral, one-pagers, case studies, videos, anything else that's been shared. And the prospect can go through these things interactively. While that's happening, we're getting updates in real time, and we're looking at the data and analytics around that interaction and activity. So if we look at an active deal room, we're looking at the total number of viewers across that prospect or sales cycle who have viewed the content that's been shared, the total number of views, the time spent with the content, and then a breakdown of who's looking at the content by role and user, what content's being viewed, when they viewed it, and how much time they've spent with it. And what that does is tie to a buyer engagement dashboard that now marketing, revenue, the leadership, and everyone can have visibility into as to how that content is performing. And a lot of what customers have told me in the past is this aspect of what's happening is, as Jeanna called it, a black hole, meaning they're putting a lot of this effort in and they're putting a lot of these resources into different places like drives and places where it's not measurable, not only measurable from what's happening externally, but not measurable from what did we contribute to this sprint cycle? What did we build? How did it perform internally? What was utilized? And how did that perform when it came to the actual deals in the pipeline? So overall, you can see all of the content over time, the influence revenue and influence pipeline, and then how that's actually trending from an individual piece of content perspective down to how things are looking over time as groups, as campaigns, as ways that you've launched things holistically. Now, we're also taking that data and comparing it not only against close one opportunity, but obviously how opportunities perform. If a piece of content is in 40% of the deals that are closed loss, but 60% in closed one, that's a tighter margin than if you're looking at 70% success rates or something like that, right? So that it gives you the ability to really understand what's happening from a performance aspect, as well as what's happening with the deal rooms and the top content that's performing across those closed one deals. Now, this not only gives you insight, but it gives the teams insight into things they should be leveraging more at certain points in the sales cycle to make sure that they're moving these things faster. They're handling objections quicker. They're utilizing the content in the way that you're meant to put it out there.
Yep.
And so,
David,
yeah,
maybe just to add there as one example, I think,
sure.
Again, I'm responsible for marketing sales here at Spekit. And the way I use this at the C-level, and I haven't often in the past gone into other enablement platforms, but the way that I use this one is at the top of the feed that David's showing you is the ability to refine this view by date and by team. And so I like to look when we do something new, like a product launch, or even, we launched 2 new case studies with clients, ZoomInfo and InMoment, maybe a month and a half ago. And for the month following that, I would come in here and I would select the dates for the last month to look at what content was added to Deal Room. And really my goal there was to be able to hold Jeanna and team accountable that we were driving the use of those new case studies into our deal rooms and into the sales team, right? So being able to drop that and look like, hey, is the sales team in the last 3 weeks since we launched this using this? Like, it might be too early to see the influence revenue 1 and 3 weeks, but I'm seeing that it's being used. And then I should see across a period of time that increase in the revenue influenced. But so that ability to manage that view is really important, I think, as it gets to something time bound, like the pop you want to see from a product launch or a new asset or those pieces of the puzzle.
Absolutely. Thanks, Seth. One more thing I wanted to call out before I wrap my part of the demo here is really that playlists are not just product playlists. They're not, and again, they can be more flexible in that way. But if we look at adding content to a deal room right here in the flow of work, I then have access as a user to those playlists. So if you look at some of the playlists that exist here, I have certain that are vertical, certain that are persona, and certain that are product based that give me the ability to very cleanly select a batch of content all at once and add it to the deal room for that particular use case, which again saves me time and having to go to different sources to aggregate that content in one place. It's saying, look, we're talking to a CRO. Let's serve up that CRO playlist and add that content directly to the deal room. So as you think about the evolution of what AI is doing from a content generation standpoint, from an organizational standpoint, the ability to reduce the amount of time that you all spend categorizing content, which is also a major, major time suck, AI is taking care of a lot of that today, right? And so there's a lot of opportunity for you all to think about how you can take that into what your next GTM launch looks like, what your next change management play looks like, how you're delivering that to the field, and in turn, how they're absorbing that and then utilizing that to move the business forward. I'm going to stop sharing here and we can open it up on the Q&A, or if there is any questions already in the chat, we're happy to start addressing those. We'll also take just general comments or anything else that you all want to discuss.
Jeanna, any questions for David after the demo? Anything you're going to do differently here on our side?
I don't know. There's a lot of good information there. Honestly, I was just wondering why your Seth favorite M&M color is yellow.
It's not. This is just the first color I thought of. But...
Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. The last thing I'll bring up, actually, if I could share this slide again, so I can do that, is one offer we did want to make for people.
Sorry, there is a question.
Oh yeah, great.
For Jeanna. for Jeanna, what's the best way for enablement and PMM team to work together? I also wanted to do, before Jeanna, I let you jump in. That's something I did want to mention, which is there is and I mentioned it sort of, there's this downstream implication of what happens when there is a product update, there's a product change, there's a new product itself, right? And that is product marketing has to figure out how to then message what's happening. Enablement then needs to figure out how to enable the teams to absorb that messaging. And a lot of times there's a disconnect in that process from product to product marketing, and then another disconnect from product marketing to enablement, and then a bigger disconnect down to the user. And so I think as that becomes one motion, right? If you look at the way that this content is created and then delivered, it is enabling users with the right messaging in the right moment. So that's my little synopsis. And I did want to sort of bring that up because it's something that I do see very commonly with our customers, and something that they're also very cognizant of addressing in real time.
Yeah, David, I think that's absolutely correct. And kind of to go off of that, if you have the option of having that very like one unified cohesive platform where you can work together with content management and also enablement, I would say that is the biggest way for you guys to work together to like actually drive change and get that content in front of your reps so then they can get it in front of your buyers in a meaningful way. However, that is not always realistic for every organization. If you're not able to have that unified one seamless platform, I would say like having very clear swim lanes for what PMM is supposed to do, and then where that handoff from PMM to enablement falls. Because I know sometimes that communication, that alignment breaks down, especially as you get closer to a launch day or something like that. But if you have, let's say, even an Excel doc, right, or a G sheet where you can say, I do that, like PMM does this and enablement does this, I will hand this off to you at this point. And then from there, you are supposed to do X, Y, Z. I found that working like that in organizations has been very helpful to establish clear guide rails for who does what, when, and why.
Yeah, that's great, Jeanna. I'd say on that swim lanes piece, the part I think that Sarah sometimes can cause the most consternation, but it's important to get right, is to figure out where that handoff, the communication around who should join meetings where a lot of those things get decided and where there should be follow-up. So, does enablement join meetings that PMM has with product past a certain stage or when you start to approach a countdown to a product launch? Or is there an async way to do that? Meetings are expensive. Maybe that's not the right path, but really clear communication on, well, if this is the product building process and then this is the product launch process, who specifically is in what meetings, and for those who are not, what is the format to convey that information? We do use product notes within Spekit. Is one of the ways we drink our own.
That's one of the last questions that just came in with 3 minutes, so you can pick perfectly. It's how do we use that internally for onboarding, tool training, and process rollout?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise, we use Spekit across all of the pieces of our puzzle, right? So it is not just for the sales team. Everyone at the organization uses Spekit. In fact, I'm 18 months in here at Spekit, and I got yelled at by our CEO in a nice way after I joined for a month, and I kept asking her questions, and she's like, check it in Spekit. This is what we do. All that information is there. So we do use it for all those places. With onboarding, we use the playlists that have kind of a staggered view of the information you need to consume at different junctures of your onboarding. There are knowledge checks that check that information in the sidebar. Then we curate and walk you through the process, what information to know. We do embed specs in all of the tools that we use. Process rollout especially is where we use a lot of the change management features, such as, the product example I just gave. We actually do a spotlight, which is that pop-up announcement feature that appears in front of you whenever we send out the product notes. You click into that, and it brings you to a spec that contains all the information in a recurring framework and format that Jeanna and team work on. And then that information is accessible for the AI engine to answer questions with and prompt information with. So we absolutely use it in all those areas. Jeanna, is there anything you would add to that or expound on?
No, I think that's great. Honestly, like the spotlights are great for highlighting, hey, this new launch just went live. Everybody needs to know this very critical piece of information. And then make sure you're maintaining and updating those playlists so they don't get stagnant. So your team always has the most relevant content in front of them for Sidekick to surface. That's really what I found works best for our launches.
And I know that this platform does abruptly cut us off in 90 seconds. So it's if anybody feels like we're just disconnected, it's not us. I promise you. It's just the
Speed
time.
round. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, Seth and Jeanna, if you wanted to wrap.
Yeah, what I was just going to share there, maybe on the slide standpoint, I think some people do know, our CEO, Melanie Flay, recently put out a book that really interestingly covers a lot of these topics. It's a free copy. We're not trying to make money here off the book, but if you go to justintimeenablement.com, you can actually get a copy of it to download or to read, but it unpacks a lot of the subjects we talked about. How do you think about the impact of AI and how enable and product marketing work in this world? And so, you can explore a lot of topics we talked about today in that book as well. But other than that, I would just say thank you all for joining. Thank you, David. Thank you, Jeanna. Thanks to everyone who came on board.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.